Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm David Blank.
And I'm Jim Esch.
This is a podcast about finding something in nothing.
Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm Jim. I'm joined by Dave Blank, and we're here today for our July podcast, Season 5, Episode 7. And we're going to talk about a book by Rick Rubin called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And I think this came up maybe in a previous podcast, did it, Dave? But we both read the book by now, and thank you for sending this book to me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I really appreciated it. You had the idea to do a show about this. What's on your mind about The Creative Act, A Way of Being?
Well, a couple of months ago, my wife discovered the book, and we got it as an audiobook. And we both started listening to it. And because Audible has a weird function that it keeps playing where the other person left off, we got through the book really fast and didn't even realize it because we were listening to. We were sort of skipping through the book, like hopscotch style. And then we started talking about it on one of our walks and realized that it's really about unfolding of life and the way that you can think about things differently, and challenge yourself to be creative in the way that life unfolds. So we bought the book. Then you and I were discussing about it. I heard a podcast. It was Rick Rubin was being interviewed by somebody. I can't remember if it was Malcolm Gladwell or, God, I'm totally spacing on that. But he was talking about how the book came to be, and how the thing that struck me was that the whole process of writing the book, which took years, was very much like the book itself, and so it was almost self-described. So the thing about this book it's got a place in my life right now, in that it sits on a table and where my wife and I sit and have coffee in the morning. And frequently, if we're talking about something, one of us will just open the book to a random page and read what's there out loud. And it always kind of makes sense for whatever we're talking about.
It's funny, like you sent that book to me, and I think I didn't realize what I was getting. I think you said you were sending me something,
right.
But we must have talked about it on the podcast, because Stacy then added the book to her Audible account.
Right.
So we had started listening to it before the book even arrived. So we listened to the whole audiobook, and we did that together. Like usually after dinner, we would just put it through the stereo, and it's like listening to a Zen master talk or something. He's got that kind of authority about him. And every little and the chapters are short, so you can just listen to a few at a time, take a break, come back the next day and pick up where you left off. And I felt like every chapter he read resonated with some part of me. Like there was no chapter in the book where I disagreed with what he was saying. And often a memory would come up of working on some creative project, whether it was a song or a recording or something I was writing, and I could resonate with what he was saying. Just made me very reflective about my own creative process.
Well, he's talking about fundamental truths, I think, in his own way. If you're open to a fundamental truth and not stuck in some sort of dogmatic thinking, as some people can be, but then you apply it to whatever you're thinking about. And it helps too, especially with the audiobook, that he punctuates a lot of the small Zen pieces with the singing bowl. I could almost picture him just sitting there and reading the book and then picking up the bowl and ding.
Right.
And that was, it really amplified the experience for me.
Do you feel like the book was inspiring and made you want to create some new things, or is it more about just the art of living?
Well, I think it's in a broader context, it's absolutely just about the art of creating your life, really.
Right.
So, and recognizing that you have a place in that creation, that we're not automated, and that we can change things and make them what we want them to be. If you've lived to a certain age, as you and I have, you can look back and see where you've done that naturally, sometimes better than others, but ultimately, you have some responsibility in what you've created. I think that the book kind of validates that.
Yeah. I mean, if you go from the title, The Creative Act, A Way of Being, it's very much preaching that this sort of creative approach is like,
Right.
It's all about process. It's all about sort of habits and being open to your creative side as you're just going through your day and doing your thing. And it's not so much about like the product, like the end product, or here's a book that's going to tell you how to achieve all your goals, or how to create a great song or whatever. It's just much more about developing these habits of mind, these practices that's really the whole point of it, isn't it? It's like when you're just in that flow state, and you're doing your thing and you're being open to inspiration and you're sort of cultivating your creative life, the end product almost doesn't even matter.
Correct. Exactly. Because what thinking about the process that is described in much of the book allows you to be confident that you're getting to where you need to be. It's not the end. It really is just about the process. And he talks a lot about finding in different, like with different artists, finding the way that they got to the end, to the point where everyone thought that's where they needed to be.
Yeah, it's very aware too. It's like he's very aware of like the mental traps that you can get stuck in, or how you can censor yourself or limit yourself to all these broader possibilities. And it seems like in his work as a producer that he must be very good at kind of cultivating this environment of like openness to like try new things out. Like, let's do things 10 different ways and see how it works out, and not be sort of like, okay, we're going to write a hit song this week. Like, it's much more about, well, let's try this, and now let's try it a different way. And it seems to me like he probably has a knack for building trust with the artists that he works with, where they feel comfortable to take those kind of chances.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from accounts that I've read about his process in the studio, he's very aloof. And some people kind of wonder if he's even there. He'll be off in the other room just listening and letting things happen.
It sounds to me like he likes to prepare a setting for the artist, like some place, like a space that's sort of comfortable, where they feel liberated. And then he seems to be pretty hands off about it from that point until he needs to intervene. Right.
Right. Until he needs to be. And then he steps in. Right.
Right.
So it's really quite simple. That philosophy is it's very simple, and yet it's surprising that more people don't do it.
Yeah, I really like the book. It's the kind of book I will go back to as well. And you can just sort of like randomly go to a chapter and read what he has to say about things.
Well, if you just skipping through, I think, is the best way to do it. Just not reading it in any particular order. And I think he even talked about that in the book. The order wasn't really as important as what he was trying to say.
There's a little bit of a danger with a book like this. Sometimes, like if you read self-help books, they sort of figure everything out for you. They map out a plan, and then you sort of feel like you come up short, like you can't live up to the standard that they are mapping out for you. So it all sounds good on paper, but then when you actually try to implement it, you just, at least for me, it's like an immediate fail. I just fall on my face. And then I end up feeling almost worse about myself until the next self-help book comes along that's going to sort of get me out of the hole I dug for myself. But this book doesn't strike me that way. Like it's because it's much more, and it's all based on like just how I reacted. Like once I finished the book, it made me want to create. It made me want to like cultivate that part. And I was doing more. You know, we've been working on some music, some new music, and I've been trying to write, and it didn't like choke that off. Like it wasn't like, well, I read this book about writing or about creating, and then you can wash your hands and say, well, I did that. Now I can like, you know, do my bills.
Right. Well, it's like reading and my mother will laugh about this. I can't explain why, but she'll laugh at this. It's a bit like reading a book on child rearing and feeling that you have an ability to be a good parent. In reality, the ability to be a good parent only happens in practice and practice and more practice. And so in a way, what Rubin's doing is not really telling you what to do. He's just telling you different scenarios and how to think, different ways that you can approach different things. But there's no dogma at all in it. Like, here's what you need to do to be a Grammy award-winning record producer.
Right.
You know? It's not like
that's
that.
not like it has this like strict outline and
No.
here's how to work on your project. It's not that at all. It's much more just inspirational and more resonating is the word I keep coming back to. It resonates. Like what he's saying, I can identify with it. I've been there. I even if I haven't been there, I get where he's coming from. The whole book just rings so true for me.
Right. Yeah, but it's a tremendous work that can be listened to or read in order, out of order, multiple times. It's really one of those transcendent books, I think. I don't know if it's a transcendent book, but the book transcends what most books do. Have you found any experiences since you started reading it where you came back to something from the book?
There was this one chapter, I'm not sure if this answers your question, but there was one chapter, I'm trying to find it, called The Great Works on page 49. And where he was talking about like the importance of immersing yourself and submerging yourself in the canon of great works, like whether that's like reading or film or art or music. And that really resonated with me a lot because I think I have made that a habit in my life to sort of always be submerging in these works. And he did a good job of explaining like why that's important, like why I'm doing what I'm already doing. And he said something on page 50 that just thought this point was so good. Because there's an endless amount of data available to us and we have a limited bandwidth to conserve, we might consider carefully curating the quality of what we allow in. Right. So I can only listen to so much music or read so many books or whatever. So I want to experience the best I can experience, you know, like time is limited. And then he says this doesn't just apply if your goal is to make art of lasting significance. Even if your goal is to make fast food, it will likely taste better if you experience the best fresh food available to you during the process. Level up your taste. That's a great line. The objective is not to learn to mimic greatness, but to calibrate our internal meter for greatness so we can better make the thousands of choices that might ultimately lead to our own great work. So, you know, just that little bit of advice, I think it's helped to explain something that I already do.
Right. He's talking about the possibility of finding your way to that ultimate moment.
If you build that awareness, okay, I may never create something as great as that, but I'll have an awareness of it. I'll have an awareness of what quality looks like so that if I do start making something, I like knowing what to shoot for or where I want to aspire towards. in my own
Right.
work.
That you're ready for it.
You're ready for it, right? And even if you don't create anything, at least you're appreciating what's out there.
Yeah. Or that you allow yourself to have that experience. I think some people don't think that they can have that experience, or they think they'll never be good enough, or that kind of that defeating thinking. And if you believe that you can succeed, you have a much better chance of succeeding. End of story. That's just the way it is. Because if you believe it, then you're going to be more likely to see the opportunities when they pass by, or when something just shows up, and you might just not see it because you're too busy thinking you can't do it.
Yeah, there's so much self-harm that happens with like creative life. We just get into these ruts where we're like, I'm not good enough. No one will like this. Oh, there was so much in here that was good also about basically like, don't care what anybody thinks about what you do.
Yeah.
Like you cannot ride that Bronco. But he had a lot in here that was very resonant on that for me. It's basically like, please yourself, do what you value, do it as well as you can. Don't give up if it's not perfect. Like there's always another day, another like attempt that you can make, and just make it, and then like let it go. He also talked about the importance of sharing it. So that resonated as well, because I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but Stacy and I have been reissuing all these old like albums that we made on tape and CD from our home studio, and we're like putting them out into distribution on all the streaming platforms. So that comes with some risk, because like you're putting it out there, and if you tell some people about it, they might hate it, they might completely ignore it. But the other side of that is, if like you don't share it, then you're sort of defeating the whole purpose of art, which is ultimately about expression, but also communication. So you need someone on the other side who potentially can receive that and respond to it. So reading this book at the same time that we've been going through those reissues has given me, I think, a little injection of confidence to say, like, yeah, like there's nothing wrong with sharing it. And then don't worry about what anyone thinks about it. Just move on.
Right. So for our listeners out there, you should really get on Spotify or Tidal and listen to Breakthrough Shine.
2 words, Breakthrough Shine. That's my plug.
It's good music. Good. I like it.
Thank you.
It's good that you're putting it out there.
That was on my mind a lot while we were reading the book. I have a strong tendency of being very shy and sort of like working in obscurity. And I like the process of creating, but I'm not always comfortable with the sharing part of it and the promotion of it.
So this helped you, or working your way through the book helped you to have the confidence to put your music out there.
Right. I feel like he understood me,
Yeah.
like, or I understood him and he understood me. Like there's that simpatico. Yeah. Okay. Even someone on his level,
Right.
like a Grammy-winning professional is an artist that he works with, they go through the same
Right.
thing.
Exactly. You're still a musician just like anybody else, Jim.
It's probably even harder if you're famous, because if you make a style change or you want to go in a new direction,
Right.
it's hard to like break away from your past.
Right. You could flop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he talks about that in the book too.
I'm sort of on an intensely personal journey with regard to the book that kind of has to do with what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Oh, that's big. Like what?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to share on that?
Well, I mean, I'm just kind of getting to the point where I'm thinking about retiring, and but I need something to do. I mean, I've got a few more years because Leah's got to get through school and be launched. But once that happens, there's less of a need for me to be doing what I'm doing. And I like what I do, and I'm proud of myself for having created it, kind of out of nothing, just I mean, lots of people do what I do, but I didn't think I could do it. And
And you really scaled it up too.
yeah,
I don't think many people are teaching, like 12 classes at a time. I couldn't do it.
and I'm not right now, but which is why I have more time to think, which is probably the problem. It's better when I'm really busy. No, I mean, I turned it into a career, and as long as I can do my work, then and everybody's happy, then I'm happy. But sometimes it can be very stressful too if I'm teaching a lot of classes because it's a lot to keep track of.
I'm also wondering, I'm just as pure speculation, but what do you think our high school teacher, Tom Williams, would have thought about this book? That's pure speculation. We can never know, but we can guess.
I think he would have loved it
Me too.
because I think he lived it. At least the person I remember in the moment, and that why not spirit. I've always had a question, and I actually talked with him about it one time, why he didn't pursue music in a bigger way. And I know he did his own thing, and I can't even begin to appreciate the breadth of work that he left behind, and worked with John and Jim and lots of other people. But he was such a gifted musician. I always wondered why he didn't take it beyond. And I remember when I was in high school actually asking him about that. And I'm trying to remember what he said, but it was just like, well, I'm happy where I am. I don't need to do more. Something like that.
Maybe he knew he was a really gifted teacher, that he almost had a purpose. He was meant to do that and meant to inspire all these other students. He probably recognized that. And then he also very cleverly figured out a way to blend his creative pursuits with his day job. He was sort of found a way to weave that other thing into what he was doing. I mean, he had a little studio in a back office in a high school. He had the 4-track in there and a keyboard and mics. That is pretty cool.
Wow.
And he had the freedom to do it.
Yeah. My wife has a quality that whenever I think about it, it kind of reminds me of him a little bit. And she'll even say it, she'll say, when I love, and that's it. Because she's very intense, and, she's in 110%. We've known each other for 21 years. And, it's been like that for 21 years. It's just been awesome like that. And that reminds me of him sometimes. He did his thing, and that's what he did. He didn't have to be John Butcher Axis, even though he introduced me to that band. But he just was himself, and I think we should all aspire to be like that. Really,
it's like his life was a work of art.
Yeah, yeah.
If you just think about all the levels that you knew him at,
right,
it sort of all fits together into this total package. And the more we've learned about that life, the details of that have filled in. It's amazing.
To a degree too, but it's also at the point where it's been long enough that it kind of is molding into a myth status.
Right.
So it's an interesting process.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we've gone from Rick Rubin to Tom Williams.
I thought of him a lot when I was listening to the book, because I agree. I think he would have loved this book. All right. Once again, we made something out of nothing.
Indeed.
Dave, thanks for, again, sharing a book with me. I really enjoyed the read. We hope to be back in August with our next installment.
Sounds good.